Hi, this is the Forest City Historical Society, and we're interviewing Thomas Tip Tedesco today. And this is June 18th, 2021. And just for your information, Tip is 99 years old. All right, now we're going to ask you some questions.
Go ahead.
Okay? Now, how about giving me the name of your mother's parents?
The names,
Their names, yeah.
the parents,
Mm-hmm.
That'd be your maternal grandparents.
Frank Schwiegel,
Right,
Mary Schwiegel.
okay. And do you know where they were born? Do you have any idea where they were born?
I do not know.
But was it Austria maybe? Like were they considered Austria too or no?
Mom was born by a midwife. They had a midwife. And Pa, I don't know where Pa was
Okay,
born.
yeah, that was your mom and dad, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, this would be like Grandpa Sweigel, okay, that you're talking about. Where did he work?
Grandpa?
Grandpa Sweigel, Frank Sweigel.
I never knew. I know he worked in the mines, and he was killed in the mines.
Okay, and that was
1917, I think.
Okay, and did his wife work or anything, or was she just
Mary?
Yeah.
No.
No. Now, what did they do at their house? Did they have boarders, or do you know what they?
Well, yeah, they had the one boarder, I remember Yearney, and I know other boarders that I knew of, because all the kids were home at that time.
Okay.
All the children.
All right. And how many children did they have?
Well, Mary they had when they came across, they had 13 children. 2 of them, I think, were died in Brazil.
Okay.
They were buried in Brazil, and the other 13 came to Pennsylvania.
Now, how do you know how they ended up in Brazil? Do you know the story of that?
I don't.
But they weren't born in Brazil. They actually came to America
On the
first.
way over, they
went to Brazil.
They died and they were buried in Brazil.
Okay. All right. Now, I know, like you said, you didn't know Grandpa Frank, but Grandma Mary. Can you tell us a little bit about her?
Well, her last name was Insitar, okay? She had relations in Minersville, Pennsylvania, relatives. I never met them relatives in Minersville, but I knew they were there, and that's going back on history. It was Minersville, was where they come from. That's.
And do you remember anything special about Grandma Mary?
Well, in front, off the porch, off the kitchen, all the neighbors, when they had pigs, I'm going to call it by this, they had pigs, they would kill the pigs right off our kitchen. They would all get together and kill that pig. And they took the fat and everything. Grandma would go in there and boil it to get the fat off it. And they'd have a big luncheon and everything. And after everything was all done, people got what they needed off the pig, and they had a supper, and that was it.
So it was basically to kill a pig, they had a party?
They had a party after. Everybody got what part of it. That was what they did. Yeah.
Now, when she boiled the pig, you said, did she make anything called svirkas? Do you remember that? Svirkas? Rendered fat, maybe?
Give me some grammar names.
Yeah, that was.
That was.
Okay, now let's go on to the Tedesco side. Okay, like your grandma and grandpa Tedesco. What were their names?
Grandpa was Anthony Tedesco,
Okay,
and his wife was Teresa.
okay. Now, what did Anthony do? What was he?
Anthony was a shoemaker in Forest City.
Okay, and you remember him?
Yeah,
Yeah. And do you remember the year he died?
yeah. He died in the old homestead. He died of pneumonia. And you remember you going in the house, you would go up the stairs, You remember?
Yeah, I do.
Up the top stairs. That's where he died, up in the top stairs. And they had him laid out in the house. And Grandma too was, when she died, she was laid in the house too.
Well, after he died, did she go to work or did she stay home with the kids?
She did that area. She did a lot of carpet work. She had a loom where she made carpets. People would bring in their rags and everything, and she would cut them up, make carpets for them, and she would get paid for it. I can remember her making their carpets. We'd have to run the spool through, you know. You pull the thing back like that, banging away. She made a lot of carpets.
Do you remember anything else about her? Any great stories about her?
No, not. She was a good cook, very good. When I went to high school in Forest City, we used to go up there and have lunch. She'd always have a lunch for us. We had to have a half-hour break if we go up there for lunch and go back to school.
Now, what school did you go to?
In Forest City?
Yeah.
The first one I went to was where the American Legion was up there, number 2 was school. I was in second grade up there.
Okay.
And then after I got sent to school over to Lincoln School. Went to school over there. Then when night closed, went down to the school behind William Penn. And then that burned down. And then most of the time that I was going to school, most of my time was spent in Forest City. I either stayed at Grandma Schwiegel's or Grandma Tedesco's. And have the lunches there. And then on weekends I would go back to Uniondale where the folks lived at that time. And then I went to school in Uniondale for 4 grades in Uniondale, the old schoolhouse.
That's the borough building now?
That's where the town building is now.
Okay.
And then after I graduated out of school up there, went to the high school in Forest City. 2 years at the high school in Forest City, and I had to resign as a sophomore, right in Depression years. And I got to work helping the farmers up there. What little in there the folks were up against it on account of the Depression. And what little I would make with the farmers would help them out on their, and Pa and Ma were under what they call the relief program at that time, where they got food given to them and everything. And Pa was working as an automobile mechanic and never got 35 cents an hour, I think. So.
Well, let's tell me about your parents. What were their names? The ones you're just talking about, your mom and pa.
Ma, Margaret. Dad was Thomas. I got the name of Junior, Thomas Jr. And the kids, you want the kid's name?
Yeah, well, your brothers and sisters, sure.
Okay, Thomas. Who's second? Butch, Francis, Butch. Margie, Margaret. Bobby. Jim. And Agnes. That's all the kids. 4 boys and 2 girls.
And of those, how many are still alive now? How many are still alive now?
Just 2 of us alive now. Jim and me.
Okay. Do you have any memories of when you were all together as kids? What did you used to do? Other than work on the farm?
Well, we lived in Uniondale. We had the creek down there. We used to do a lot of swimming. Of course, we played baseball. Had the baseball team. And we always got together.
You know, remember any good stories when your kids got in trouble?
Never got in trouble, thank God.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, all right, one time, I'll tell you. I got to tell you this one. Down below Unionville, there was a farmer by the name of Harvey Dimmick. And he had a lot of ducks. And the ducks would come up the creek. And we stone them, chase them back to where they come from. Well, when he died, his wife died, and they had an auction down there. And they had a four-wheel buggy at the auction. And they asking for bids on the auction, on the wagon. 4 wheels, spoke wheels. Brother Butch bid 10 cents, and he gave it to him. So he went give the guy the dime, the 10 cents, got a hold of the wagon, pulled it home. And that he was till they used it one Halloween. Where was the buggy? Up on top of the roof. The kids stuck it and put it up on top of the roof. And Bill Curtis, back at the schoolhouse, he owned all the land, and he had a farm. He had cows, and he used to pasture the cows in there. And he had farm equipment, and he had an old rake, horse rake. And Butch and me went over. Junk was worth something, iron, and we brought that home. Took it all apart and sold it as junk. I'm talking about trouble, okay? Curtis found out somebody stole his rake. And he talked to Pa and Ma about it, and he says, I need that rake. Well, Pa had to find a rake someplace somewhere. It cost him $12 to buy a new rake for him. But he took the old rake back. We never sold junk. He took the old rake back.
And all the pieces that it was in? And what happened to you? Did you get in trouble with Mom and Pa?
We got in trouble. But I don't ever spanked. I don't ever got spanked. Never got spanked.
No?
Unfortunately.
I know you had mentioned when we were kind of talking before about your father working in the mines and about tell us about the incident with his getting hurt.
Well, when he worked at the mines, he was like a machinist. He would take care of the trolley cars, keep them in motion, and lubricated and all that. When the mules would bring the cars up out of the mines, they would unhook the mule, and if there's anything wrong with the mine car, Pa had to take care of it. And then, I don't know how long he worked up there, but we lived in Cowtown at that time, and he went to school to be an automobile mechanic. I don't know where he went to school. But then we moved, in 1929, we moved to Unionville. Douglas and Yale had a garage across from where Bobby lives now, Douglas and Yale. He sold cars, and Pa got to be a mechanic for him. And we moved upstairs in that building until Mr. Yale's daughter, Allison, I think, wanted us to get out. She wanted a place. And so we moved in the William Todd house up on the Mausoleum Road. He had a home up there. We moved up there. And that's where we lived until such time as Earl Payne on the corner across from Yale's garage. He had a service station. His wife's name was Irene. She was a school teacher. They took in boarders. They sold gasoline there, and the ice cream, candy, and some vegetable canned goods and everything. And then Payne Atlantic Refining Company owned the building, and Penny had to get out. So the place was for sale. And Pa and Ma found out how much they wanted for the place. I think it was $1,500 at that time. And they borrowed the money off D.B. Gibson. And they bought the place. And they started selling gas there. Ma had ice cream and candy. When the school kids would have recess, or noontime, they would come out and buy the candy and ice cream. And we would take care of the service station. Pa had extra work in the garage. They had a 2-car garage. He would do extra car work in there. And then he got to be a mechanic of the garage. He worked for Reese and Manling. He worked for places in Carbondale. Wherever they needed mechanics and paid him a little bit more, he was where he went.
When he worked in the mines, he got hurt. You want to tell us about when he got hurt?
Well, he was working on a mine car, and somehow he had his hand under the wheel, and it moved. He said it come right off. And they took him right down to the doctor, and they sewed that back right on. He always had that scar. I think I still got part of that scar right there where he had that taken off. And he went back to work for him.
And he came to the doctor in Forest City?
Dr. McGuire.
And never had any problems with it after?
No.
Wow. And that's without a hospital, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember any traditions that any of the families had? Like, did you, at Christmas time, do anything special, or for birthdays, did you do anything special for any holidays?
Oh, we always got together. We always had a family. We liked to get together on Christmas time. Yeah. In Grandma Tedesco, the families, they lived in all different Newark. A lot of families in Newark. And at Christmas time, they would come up to Grandma Tedesco's, and they would always come up to the house and visit us, and have a good party.
Now, your mom wasn't the Italian. Now, was she a good cook?
Yeah.
Yeah. And did she cook any ethnic foods? Like
She loved lemon pie. We always had a lot of lemon pie. I know that. And we had always spaghetti. Pa was a great spaghetti man. Well, Mom was a pretty good cook.
So after you were done with school and you worked on the farm, did you join the service first, or did you get married first? What did you do?
No, when I worked on the farm, I worked part-time for the Pennsylvania Department of Highways. In the springtime, or now, in the summertime, when they would cut the hay alongside the road on the shoulders, I was a flagman. And they had a mowing machine pulled by horses, and I was a flagman behind them. Well, when they got done cutting, I was done with I got so much an hour. And then there was an opening at Pleasant Mount, Dairyman's League, milk receiving station. So I got a job up there. Max Coleman was my boss. And I worked there, I don't know how many years it was. I think 4 years. And that's when I had to sign up for the drafts at that time. And Bernie Chesnick and I worked together as a plant. We took canned milk in. We had 140 dairies from Pleasant Mount, Susquehanna County, and Wayne County coming in there. 140 dairies at that time. And we had to sign up for the draft, and Bernie says, you know, they're going to get us one way or another. What are we going to do? We decided to enlist in the Navy, okay? So we waited for the Navy guy come around, interview us, you know, tell us where to go, just sign up. And in the meantime, they found out that Bernie was going to, on the draft, the Army was going to take him. So right away, the Navy took him and sent him, well, he sent him to Great Lakes for training. And I was still there. And then a week later, I had to go to Scranton for the Navy. And at that time, there was 110 people enlisted in the Navy. We lined up down at the bus station in Scranton, waiting for a bus to take us to Philadelphia to be sworn in the Navy. And at that time, I'll never forget, Scranton Tonian was a newspaper, and they took pictures of us. And they published it in their Sunday paper, and we got the pictures of it, and the picture, I don't know whatever happened to it, but it showed them 110 people waiting for the bus to go to Philadelphia. When we got to Philadelphia, this federal building, they swore us in. And from there on, we got a train, they sent us out to Chicago, Great Lakes training station. And I went to boot camp out there for 4 weeks. It's in September the 10th, 1942.
That's when you joined?
That's when I got sworn in.
Okay.
They got to boot camp.
So then, after you were out of boot camp, where did you go? What was the next thing?
We had September the 10th, sworn in, had 4 weeks of boot camp. They put us on a train to San Francisco. And when we got to San Francisco, they put us in what they call Treasure Island. They used to have the World's Fair at Treasure Island, and the Army took it over for receiving bearers for naval personnel. We could see Alcatraz from the Treasure Island. We waited there for further assignment, FFT. Every day we'd get up. I think we was there 10 or 15 days. We'd have to look at the roster, see if our name was on there and what to do. And I finally found out that, okay, our name was on there. We had sea bags, pack your sea bag, and we had to report to a train, and they took us to San Francisco. In San Francisco, we got on a luxury liner. I forgot what the name of it was. There was 5,000 people on that, going to Hawaii on account of the Pearl Harbor was bombed. There was all kinds of machinists and helpers on there to work at the Navy Yard in Pearl Harbor. We had civilians on there and Navy personnel. For 4.5 days it took us to go over. We never had a room on that ship. We had to sleep on the deck. And then we got into Pearl Harbor, and then they assigned us to different places. FFT, Fleet Further Transfer. And they had us in working parties, doing whatever they needed. You know, we had nothing to do. Wait for FFC, Fleet Further Transfer. And I remember working for a group from the Army loading ammunition, and they would take us to the ships. Ships were in the harbor. And all of a sudden, I got my notice, report to Fort Island, FFT. And I packed my stuff, what I had, and went to Fort Island. And we were so close to, I spent 2 nights at Fort Island. We were so close to where the Arizona was sunk. You could see the Arizona out there. And the harbor, Pearl Harbor, that time, from the bombing, we couldn't sleep with the windows open on the barracks on account of the smell coming from the harbor, from the bombing and everything. And then one day, the FFT, Tedesco, pack your bags. They took us over to the airport, put us on a DC-4 or 2, I don't know, and put us over Maui, the island of Maui, Hawaiian Islands. And I got assigned to a carrier aircraft service unit. That was the name of the U group up there. And I was a seaman, second class at that time. And when I got there, they put me on, I was new. They had squadrons there of fighter planes, dive bombers, torpedo planes. That was the base, carrier aircraft service unit. And they had mechanics there and everything taking care of them planes. And they put me on, first thing I did was put me on compartment cleaning. I had to take care of a barracks. And the guys who slept in there, when they'd go to work and everything, the other guys, I would have to take care of that compartment, clean up and everything. And after a while, I got to remiss on this. They were short of aviation electricians made. And we had a officer to come down and said, look, any of you fellas want to be what they call a striker. Would you like to go for a rating? And well, we need radar men up there. We need electricians. Come up there. We'll give you training, everything, and lessons, and teach you, and see if you can get a rating out of it. So I volunteered, and I went up there, and he was training us and everything. And so after a while, I took a lesson, and I got to be a third class petty officer as an aviation electrician. And all the time I was there, these squadrons would come in from the States. They'd come into Pearl Harbor, landed Oahu, fly over to Maui for first-year training. They would take training over there with their dive bombing fighter planes and torpedo planes. And we had to take care of them all the time there. When they had all their training, they would all get together, fly over the base, goodbye. They'd go on a carrier. And they would train on a carrier. And that's the last we know of them. One of the squadrons I'll never forget was Butch O'Hara. He was a pilot. He had how many fighter planes he took down. And one of the guys on there was a guy from Herrick Center, Frankie Semro. And we had our name on our here. See, I see Semro. I said, Semro, where are you from? He says, Herrick Center. He said, who are you? I said, I'm Tom Tedesco from Uniondale. Oh my God. And we had a hell of a time. He was waiting there to come back to the States, you know. He was a gunner's mate, third class gunner's mate. He was with Butch O'Hara's squadron. And he come back to the States. He married a Zeter girl. And then he got, later on, he had 30 years and he retired. They lived in Forest City for a long time. And I don't know where he went after that.
So did you stay on Maui then all the time?
18 months I was on Maui. Then they had the program in at that time, if you had 18 months overseas, we were considered overseas, you would go home on leave. So I said to Park one day, you ready to go home on leave? And they put us on a Army tank carrier, you know. You said, pack out your gear, 40 pounds is all you're allowed. You're going to fly back to the United States from Hawaii, from Pearl Harbor. When we got into the dock, they put us on one of those, where they move Army tanks, you know. Some of the roughest waters from Maui over to Pearl Harbor. Oh my God, I never went up on deck. I was seasick. When we got to Hawaii, you guys are not going to fly back. He said, the fly back is for the upper brass. So they put us back on, it was a merchant marine ship. and we got back into Frisco. Then I got back into Frisco, and I come home on 30 days leave. And when I got 30 days leave, reassignment, they says, where would you like to go? You're on a reassignment. Well, I said, I'm an aviation electrician. I would like to go to the Naval Air Station in Philadelphia. That's the closest for me to my home. Well, we'll see what we can do. Well, they couldn't do it. You know where they signed me? Naval Air Station, Clinton, Oklahoma. They had a Naval Air Station out there. So I got the orders to go to St. Louis, get a train, and go to Clinton, Oklahoma. There's a Naval Air Station. And when I got there, they had planes, but they was teaching personnel how to radio control planes. And when I got there, I didn't know nothing about that. I was always with the bombers and torpedo planes and fire planes. So I told them, I said, look, this is all new to me. I said, I'm not going to do you any good. I said, you got to train me all this stuff. I want to transfer. 10 days, I got to transfer to Alameda Naval Air Station outside of California. That's where I spent most of my time. That's my history. On Alameda, they brought planes back from the Pacific, from the war zone. Planes were all shot up and everything. And they would start 12 spots. Every spot was putting that plane together. By the time you got to the 12th spot, where they put the engine in, it was ready to be flying. On spot one that I was on, we had to install the electrical gear. And when you got done with your electrical gear, you moved to another spot. And it went up 12 spots like that. And that's what we did all the time there.
So when you were discharged, what rank were you?
Second class. I made second class.
That was a seaman? Second?
Well, seaman second class. No, aviation second class.
Oh, okay.
Second class petty officer.
Okay. Now, so when you're...
When I was ready for discharge, you see, after a certain time on discharge, I didn't have enough time in. When I enlisted, it had to be for 4 years. But my time was up in 3.5 years. So they put me in the Naval Reserve, which I served for 10 years after. And we were discharged at Bainbridge in Maryland. That's when I came home.
So,
And I worked at the Dairymen's League at that time. And when I got back home, my job was still, they had to take me back to work. So I got back in the creamery at Pleasant Mountain. They called it a creamery. All it was a receiving station. So I worked there, 3 years, I think. And they had come around one time, the big wheel come out of Liberty, New York. Never forget him, George Decker. And he says, we got openings for 3 plant managers, because you got all the training. You can have a choice of them 3 if you want to go. Well, I said, what do you mean about going? Well, you got to quit here, and we'll transfer you to one of those if you go. So I looked them over. One was at Kerhonkson, New York. One was at Central Square, New York. And I forget where the other one was, near Liberty, New York. So I found out at Central Square they had a Naval Reserve training up there. So I'll take Central Square. It's 25 miles north of Syracuse. So I took that as a plant manager up there. And we had to move. Syl and I had to move. And at that time, that plant at Central Square, the guy, the manager was there. He got taken to kill. So they fired him. And they took me in his place, But they had a company home. we moved into the company home. We had it good. I didn't have to pay rent or nothing all the time there. And I got to tell you, at that time, the home we lived in, the New York Central run this way, north and south. The O&W, the old O&W, run across, and they had across the tracks there. And they would run to Oswego, New York. They would cross over there. And after a while, they had a promotion of Adams, New York, a cheese plant. It's a promotion, you want to go. You got to learn how to make cheese. I took it. So in the meantime, they got somebody else to run the plant, so I took up Adams to run the cheese plant. And we're making cheese there for Stouffer restaurants. Big 40-pound blocks and big 80-pound wheels. All for Stouffer restaurants. And I was in charge. I had 35 people working for me. And it was quite a thing, making them cheese and everything. We had, when all done cheese making, we didn't make it in a flush part of the season when the cows were giving more milk. There was a lot of milk. They had to do something with that milk, so they made cheese out of it. And when the flush, what they called the flush, when the flush was over, then I was in charge of the plant. I had to take care of everything, upkeep and all that, painting job and stuff like that. I was the only one, alone. And Stouffer restaurant would have come around an inventory to make sure they had all their cheese. And the cheese was wrapped in a veneer box, like not a box, or a container. And it had the weight of the cheese on the outside. And he would write down each one, make sure nobody was stealing it, you know. So that they would come around, and every 3 months to do that, until some time that they would send a tractor trailer in, load it up to cheese, and take it somewhere. Then that was it. And at the plant, I was in charge. I worked alone. And the other plant, part of the plant, was a receiving station where they took in canned milk, and they shipped it out by bulk, tanks. And they shipped the milk to the Peter Kyler Kohler something, which is part of Nestle's. The manager of the other plant, we couldn't get along. So we moved, Sil and I moved to Adams Center. And at that time we had Danny. And I put in for quit my job. I told him I want to transfer somewhere with Durham's League, wherever you got to take me. And I wanted to get in Scranton. That was the nearest one. Harley Stark from Uniondale was like a supervisor. And I knew him real well. He said, we'll try and get you a job out of the Scranton division. So we moved back to Uniondale. I had to get an Atlas truck mover, moved back to Uniondale. Bob Tedesco, at that time, said there was an opening in Uniondale where we live now, and Claude Ziegler lived there, and he was moving out, and that place will be vacant. So we moved in there, and that's where we lived ever since.
Okay, now I want to go back. I have a couple questions. One, when you said at the creamery that you just got the milk there, that you just collected it there. Where did that milk go from the creamery then? How did it?
Well, that from Pleasant Mountain.
Right, from Pleasant Mountain.
It went by railroad tank cars. The O&W had would put 2 tank cars where we pumped the milk in there. After the milk is dumped and weighed, and samples are taken for, well, first the milk would come in cans. Come down the conveyor, we'd have to take the top off and look like there was no bloody milk or anything in them cans, you know. And take the odor of it. If it smelled bad, we could reject it. And the guys would dump it into a weigh scale. Each dairy had a number, and when their cans were done, you take the weight of it, and you take a sample of it, and put the cans through the can washer, come out the other end, and they would put their cans up. And the milk went down into the vat, was pumped over to refrigeration, which was cooled by brine, cold brine, run through pipes through there. The milk run on the outside of them, not with the pipes.
Right.
And we pumped them into the tank cars. And when the tank car was full, well, when they come back, the O&W would bring the tank cars back from Jersey, Seahawken, New Jersey. And we would have to clean them. We'd have to go out there and clean them tanks. Go out there with a hose and material, crawl in there and clean everything up. And then we'd have to disinfect it, close it up, then hook it up so we pumped the milk from the refrigeration into that tank. And they had 2 tanks, a lot of milk. And we'd seal it up. And then when the O&W would come up, and they would take them 2 tanks and go. And when they come back at night, they'd bring 2 empty tanks back. For us next morning, we'd have to clean them. That was our job at the creamery.
Okay, now I have another question. You mentioned Sil, which I know is Sylvia. How did you meet Sylvia? How did you get together?
How did I meet her? And I was after the service was over, they had a job, what they call NRA, where you could work in a factory, like, you know. And her brother Joel introduced me to Sylvia at that time. We got acquainted. And how we got acquainted, they down where Cosey's shop is, there used to be carnival grounds down there. I went to a carnival one night and I met Sylvia there, and I begged her to go on the swings with me. She wouldn't go, see? So we got really acquainted, and that was it with me and her. And I got to know her folks and everything, and they lived on Hudson Street in Fort City. And then we took on from there.
Well, tell us about your family now. How many, your children?
Had 4 boys and 2 girls. Danny, Alan, Joseph, Rick, Margie, Margaret, and Agnes. 4 boys and 2 girls.
No, but no, that was you had 2 daughters? Or you're talking about your sisters?
Sisters.
Oh, okay. But with your sons, you had just 4 sons, correct? And how many grandchildren do you have now?
8 grandchildren. 4 are great grandchildren. Danny's wife's children. That's great. There's 8 of them. But for a long time, I only had 6. Ricky's 2 girls and Danny's 2 children. And then Danny got a divorce, and he married this other girl out there from Chicago, and he had the 2 children, and that's how I got great.
So what else do you want to tell us about life back when you were a kid, back when you were young? You know, is there anything that was special about Forest City or special about Uniondale?
Or any mining accidents or anything that happened like that? Any bad storms?
Well, at Uniondale, of course, we had the baseball team all the time. We had baseball. And we used to play Herrick Center. We used to play Vanley. We used to play Browndale. We used to play Forest City with the Browndale and the teams. Then we got in the Mountain League, and then we played New Milford, Hartford, Herrick Center. All the teams in Susquehanna County.
Was there anybody from any of those teams that became like a semi-pro player or a pro player?
Yeah, Francis Chesney, his nickname was San. Carbondale Pioneers had a team. Their big wheels on the Chicago, or not Chicago, but Philadelphia Phillies was the home team of the Carbondale team. And San got hooked up with them. He was a pitcher. And then he got going to Mahoney City, and he pitched for them down there. And he had to give up. His arm gave up on him. That was the end of San. That's as far as he got as a pro. But all the time we've had teams in Uniondale, they were always looking for players. And I tried out with that team in with the Philadelphia Phillies in Carbondale. I was the first baseman, but I couldn't make out. I was not fast enough for him. And then the Biggins Triplets had a team. They were looking for players. Went up there for a tryout. I couldn't make it. So that was the end of my career in baseball.
Is there a special reason why you are here? The day you were born, did something happen?
Well, as I said, the day that I was born, there was a cloudburst, and that's why I'm here. Ma got scared, I guess. Yeah. We lived on the upper road in Cowtown, at that house that I showed you there. Rudy Tuzer and Helen were the landlords. We lived on one side of the house. That's where I was born. And found out later that Mom had to have a midwife when I was born. I remember they had midwives in those days. You probably heard of them. They'd have somebody in that area, always women that were pregnant are going to have babies. They'd always call the midwife to help them have the babies.
At that time, I don't think there were any hospital births. I think everybody was basically born at home.
No,
unless there was a
no.
complication.
After I was born, all the kids was I think born in the hospital.
Oh, were they?
Yeah. They had General Hospital up on Carbondale.
Mm-hmm.
And then it got to be Marion, you remember?
Yeah, in Carbondale.
Danny was born in the General at that time.
What do you know about that stone face, that head that's carved? Do you know
Okay.
anything about that?
The stone face was built by people by the name of Berish, Berish. They lived in Cowtown, and he was married to one of the Zoller girls. And he went up there with other ones, and they carved out that stone face up there. And that was quite a thing in those days.
Yes.
And people used to go up there in the summertime they had a swinging bridge across from where Dominique lived.
Wow.
They would cross on that swinging bridge and go up to visit the stone face. And as years went by, they got knocking the stone off, the nose off and everything. And they would try to patch it up and everything. So I don't know what's there now. I don't know.
Yes.
But it was quite a thing.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. People got pictures of it and everything.
Did that Berish ever say who that face was? That who he was trying to carve? People say it looks like George Washington.
He did it
but
from just
a
I
face.
probably had a picture of. I think it was Washington, wasn't it? I think
That's
Washington.
what it looks like. Yes.
It looks like it.
Mhm. Now, do you remember Swinging Bridge when it was built or anything?
No, they stayed up for a long time, and then I think what happened. I think they had at the Stillwater Dam. They had gates up there where they had to release so much water to go down into the pump house in Cowtown. And if we released too much water, it it would wash everything away. And that's what took the swinging bridge out.
I know that Swinging Bridge, people used to, like the miners would cross that to go to
Right,
work.
go to work, right, yeah.
And what mine was over on the other side then?
Stillwater, there's Stillwater mines.
Mhm.
Now, the Stillwater mines had shafts going in towards where Shirosics lived up up on the mountain road, okay? You could see where they went down in. Frankie Schriegel worked up there, and a lot of people from Cowtown worked up there. And as a load would come out of the mines, it would come up a shaft like this. The guy up the top would open the gate on that mine car, and they would get out in the buckets. And at the crossing in Uniondale, below Dominic's, they had cars, railroad cars, mine cars. And they would go over on a tram with a big chain across. When they come over there, a guy would dump it in them cars, fill them up. And when they load them, they'd have to stop. The guy would have to move another car down in there to fill up. And finally, that petered out up there at Stillwater. But they have a lot of people from Cowtown worked in there, which they did in Peterson mine. Most of them worked. Peterson was Cowtown.
Mm-hmm.
What is Cowtown? Where was that? What is it?
At Cowtown, most of the natives either had a cow or pigs, okay? And at Mary Stevens, Grandma Schwiegel's daughter, okay. At her homestead, she had cows down there. And she used to take her cows up to where St. Joseph Cemetery was, and that's where the cows would eat the grass, okay? And she would do the haying up there. That was all hay at that time, and grass. And finally, Martin Mukic owned that land up there, and he sold it to the church, St. Joseph Church. And Mary had to take her cows back home at that time. And so now they call anybody that dies, they're going to Mukic's pasture, because he owned it. And that's where it is today. That's how many out there. A lot of them, most of the Sylvanians were Sylvanians, they call them grounders. They were buried in St. Joseph. Irish was born, what's the Sacred Heart?
St. Agnes. St. Agnes was.
St. Agnes. Most of the Irish people were born in St. Agnes. But they always say, well, you're going to go to Mookie's pasture.
Wow. Do you remember your first car? Your first car that you bought?
First car that I had?
Yeah.
Ha!
And how much was gasoline back then?
Well, actually, the first car that I ever owned was a 1927 Essex.
Wow.
I got pictures of that at home.
Wow.
Pa always had the car, and we could use the car. He had first one he had was a 34 Plymouth. Then he had a Chrysler. Then he had a Graham Page. And we could use that car when we take turns on it. The boys used to take turns on use the car when they needed it. Make sure you had to put it in gas.
Do you remember how much gas cost back then?
Oh God, gas was, I think, 6 gallons for $1, I think, at that time.
Huh. How about the street? Was this dirt road out here? Were these roads dirt?
This road was here, yeah.
That was a dirt road?
That was considered Route 170 at that time. Route 170 started in Carbondale and ended up at Halstead, Pennsylvania, or Great Bend.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they put the dam in, they changed it to 171. That's what.
Wow.
Do you, can you describe the house like the house you lived in Forest City? Like, did you have a lot of bedrooms? Did everybody have to sleep in one room?
In where we lived?
Yeah.
Oh, we had just the 2 bedrooms until we moved out of there in 1929 when we moved to Union. We just had the 2 bedrooms.
What kind of heat did you have in it? What kind of heat?
Kitchen stove
Really? Oh.
with the old, they called it a dock ash. The oven, you would put bricks in the oven. When you go to bed at night, you take the bricks for you to keep warm.
Yeah, wow.
They heat the bricks up.
And what'd you do for, like, taking a bath? You didn't have a bathroom inside, right?
No, they had a bathroom in his house.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, they had a bathroom. Yeah, we had a bathroom, just a bathroom and a toilet.
What about at Mary Swiegel's? When you stayed there with Grandma Swiegel? Well, she didn't have a bathroom,
No
did she?
bathroom, no, there was a tub. Everybody was cleaned up with the tub. And everyone scrubbed their backs and everything.
Huh.
Yeah.
How'd you heat the water? How'd you heat the water?
And, well, they had, at the end of the stove, they had like a big tank. Here's a stove. And there was a big tank, and that was heated with coils from where the fire was. The coils and water in them coils, and go over to the tank. And they would get their water out of there with dippers and buckets and pour it into where they wash, get their shoulder. And they all burned coal in that stoves. No wood, hardly any wood.
Wow.
All coal.
How did you get the coal? Did you buy it or did you just go pick it?
Everybody was picking coal on the rock dumps at that time. If you would get a coal in, you'd get maybe a half a ton or a quarter at a time. And they would take it back at the house, back at the kitchen. That's where the coal bin was. But most everybody was the rock dump from the coal mine in Forest City. They'd be go picking the coal down there, and a lot of it, you know. But when they loaded the coal up for the breaker in Forest City, then pushers on the railroad would bring it up to Cowtown, and they would wait. They had a water tank down by the crossing from Dominic's, the crossing. There was a water tank. And the engines would get filled up with water. And in the meantime, the whole freight would stop with coal on these cars. People in Cowtown, they get up on them cars, push the coal off.
Wow.
And when they take the weight, they get on there picking that coal up, take it home. So they call them dicks on the railroad police, they call them dicks. And they would go investigate people's house about that coal.
Oh.
And the people got to, they would buy a little coal and get a receipt from the coal man and show them, well, here's our coal. So they couldn't find the people. All kinds of games going.
Wow.
But everybody used to get their coal, get down there with buckets and wagons and push them off with their feet like off on them cars. All the Cowtown they had coal.
Wow.
But nobody had a furnace at that time. Only the wheels, the big people had a furnace. Most of them had, in their front room, they had the kitchen stove, they had a little thing in the bedroom, not the bedroom, but the front room. They would have fires in there or something.
Like
Coal fire.
kerosene heaters too?
Huh?
Kerosene heaters?
No kerosene,
No.
no.
Nothing like that yet?
Did they have a lot of funerals in the homes back then? A lot of funerals inside the homes?
Yeah, most everybody was dying when they died at that time. They were laid out at home, yeah.
Oh.
Now, I know there's stories that they say when someone got killed in the mines, that the company just brought the body to the house, left it on the porch. Is that true? Do you know if that's true, that's how they handle it?
No, I can remember when somebody was killed in the mines, all the church bells, they were all the ringing church bells,
Oh, wow.
like that. And of course, as you say, they were always laid out in the homes, most all the time. Funeral parlor, I don't think there was any funeral. Well, McGranigan was a big undertaker in Forest City. And then they got the Joneses after that. And Glinsky used to be an undertaker in Forest City. And they all had their own religious people who would go there. The Sylvanians would go to Glinsky. The Irish would go to Joneses. Glinsky would be Irish, or Granners. But Brannigan, you would take other ones, you know? And that was it. Then later on, Conshire had a funeral parlor across from where NEP building is. That was a funeral parlor. And he wasn't making out good. And he moved to Amsterdam, New York. And that place remained idle for a long time.
Then Attorney McHale moved in there, I think.
McHale used it after.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you have any more stories you want to tell us? Anything that you remember about life?
With who?
Anything that happened to you, in your 99 years of life.
Did you see a lot of change in Forest City?
Well, the worst thing that ever happened to me is the outfit I worked for. I was what they call a field representative. And we were a federation of milk cooperatives. And I had cooperatives assigned to me from New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Vermont. I had them assigned to me, and I was servicing cooperatives. And I was down in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, when this happened. I was at Mount Joy, Pennsylvania. We had the Mount Joy Farmers Cooperative. And they had a meeting down there, and I had to go to that meeting because I was their representative. And I had to speak. I had to speak at their meetings, tell them about the home office and everything like that. And on the way home, I started to get a pain in my side over here. And on the way home, I had to stop at Goshen, New York. We had the Slate Hill Milk Producers Cooperative was having a meeting, and I had to be at that meeting. So at the meeting, I told them, look, I don't feel good. I got to get home. I got 100 and some miles to go home. We lived in Unionville at the time. So I quick went home, and on the way home, I drove, was just over here. My pains was over here. I got home, and I went and I laid on the couch. I told Sil, look, I don't feel good. I got pains in my side. Doc Simahusky was a doctor. She called Doc up. Doc come up, appendix.
Oh, well.
They rushed me to Marion, and they operated on me. They had to get this was at nighttime, about 9 o'clock at night.
Wow.
The doctor they got was Dr. Morg. He was out on the Gulf Coast somewhere. They got him to come and operate. So he operated on me. And I was in the hospital, I don't know how many days, but they had me training for that scar on the appendix like that.
Oh.
Made sure that I was getting back.
Did the doctors make a lot of house calls back then? They make a lot of house calls back then, the doctors?
Yeah. Yeah, Doc Simahusky was our family doctor at the time. We all went to him, and
Yeah. But they came out to the house then?
yeah, he would come, He would make house calls, though. A lot of different ones would make house calls. You had to go to their office.
Yeah.
But he always made a house. Doc Simahusky was a farmer boy. He was a farmer boy. I'll never forget when I was in the hospital, and they had to, every day they come around and make sure that I was coming along good on that from the appendix, and I'd have to give them a urine a sample, They'd leave a bottle for me with that room number on there, and then they left a bottle one day, and for me, there's a wrong room number on it, okay? And some guy walking across the hall, and I remember I could hear him sliding his feet. Hey, what's your number? He told me what his number was, so hey, this is your bottle, it's not mine. So he scrambled in and got his bottle, and in the meantime, I called the nurse. I said, the bottle you give me was not for me, but for what's his name next door. So that was it. I never, because they were seeing how I was coming along from that appendix.
They would have kept you longer.
That was something at that time. Oh, God, I could see him shuffling across the floor. Hey, this is your number.
Wow. Was there many hucksters back then, like selling things door to door in town here?
Any hucksters that,
Oh, yeah.
Was there? What did they sell?
In Cowtown, we mentioned the cows, they had cows or pigs and so on. Well, on the railroad, the trains coming down after they delivered their loads and everything, they would put torpedoes on the track, okay? And on the rail is like this, and the torpedo was a flat piece like this, go over the rail. And when that train went over, they would burst. That would give the engineer a warning that he's coming near a crossing or something. Well, what was left was the lead. People would get on there and pick up the lead because they'd buy the lead in them.
Yeah.
And we had to call a junk man. He would come along once a week, start at one end of Forest City, go up and down the road, the top road, and people would sell their rags to them, the lead from the railroad. Mason jars had a cap on there where they did the canning. They was worth something. And this, they call him the Sheeny. Sheeny.
Do you know his real name? What was his real
And
name?
he had a monkey on there with the hurdy-gurdy too.
oh yeah, I do remember that.
You remember? And they would go along and here he comes. Everybody, he'd buy the rags, buy the bags, so much a pound. And then he'd go on and come back in about 10 days or something, see anybody had anything.
Oh.
That's it.
I think I've seen people talk about him in Carbondale. I think he kind of
Yeah.
went through the Mid-Valley.
He ended up with a big place in Carbondale. See, Harry Lessick. His name was Harry Lessick. I had a junkyard in Carbondale for a long time.
Now, what about?
And when he come to Uniondale, where Bobby lived, across the road was Churchill's farm. And Harry Lessick would come there. Ari had a lot of horseradish. He would sell it to Lessick. And Lessick would park his horse there and feed it and everything. Go and take so much horseradish, and he paid Churchill for it. And I never forget that. Ari Churchill shipped milk at the time.
So he always came with a horse cart then, a cart pulled with the horse.
Yep.
Oh.
But he wouldn't. As far as he went, that was it. Churchill Farm. No, nothing farther.
Right. Now,
Harry Lessick.
what else would be delivered? You had ice. Did you have an ice box instead of refrigerators?
No, the milk was cooled at Lewis Lake. When the ice got thick enough, they would cut the ice, deliver it to the farmers, and milk what they call ice houses. They come in big chunks. They get so many cakes of ice. They put it in their ice house, and they would cover it over with sawdust to keep it from thawing too much. Mm-hmm. And in a milk house, they had a place like a vat like this, and they would put the ice in there, and then they put the cans in there. The night's milk had to be cooled, and they put the can of milk in there to be cooled. The next morning, when the milkman come, he had to take that and take it to the creamery. That's how they cooled their milk. Every farmer had a milk house. That's how they cooled it.
Now, what about in your own house? Did you have like a refrigerator or an ice?
Oh, I had a refrigerator, yeah.
Oh, did you have something that ran by electricity or?
Electricity.
When you were kids, though, when you were young?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You never used kerosene lamps in your house? Kerosene lamps? You never used them in the house?
I can't get them.
Yeah. Did you ever use kerosene lamps in the house, or did you always have electricity?
Well, when we moved to where we are now, at that time they had kerosene heater in there. Their tanks were way on the other side of the house, where my flowers are, and they had a copper tube pipe running over there. And of course, the kerosene, when they go out, you get that, the house would blacken up.
Yeah.
So we were landlords at that time. Bob Spencer owned the house. We were paying rent. And we told Bob, we got to do something. Let's get a furnace or something in here. So Bill Curtis was he sold Esso burners. He come up and put an Esso burner in the cellar. And that's how we got our heat. But the heat from the burner we had in there was registers in the floor, so the heat would go upstairs to the bathroom or the bedroom. And then when we got the heat from the basement, they put radiators in the house too. We had steam heat, and we still have it.
What about when you were we were probably about 8 years old when you moved to Uniondale? From
7.
7?
7.
Do you remember what it was like living up there in Cowtown, as you put it, when you were kids? Did you all just hang out together, or were there a lot of kids up there?
Well, when I stayed at Grandma Tedesco or Grandma Striegel a lot, I used to have to walk to school up to number 2 school where the Legion was, and then when we got over to Hudson Street to the Lincoln School, I had to walk that far. And then we moved down to the one where William Penn is. Of course, that eventually burned. In the meantime, we went back to Uniondale then at that time. See.
Okay, I just want to ask you a question about the William Penn School that burned. Where were the front doors? Did they face to Delaware Street? Was it up farther than where the second school that was built there?
If I recall, one of the entrances was, remember the ambulance building used to be up there?
Right.
Well, that was one entrance to go into that school there.
So
that was quite a fire at that time.
Yeah, so they built another school after that one.
Yeah, right.
So it was built in a different spot, or was it built in the same spot?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. After that, because we were moved to Uniondale.
Okay.
Yeah. In the Forest City High School, when we moved to Uniondale, when you graduated from Uniondale, buses took us down to the high school in Forest City. In the high school, it was one side for boys and one side for girls. And we were from the farmers, they called us farmers. They would let us in before we let the city folks in. They used to raise heck with us, always raising, the farmers are here, the farmers are here, Yeah. And then I quit as a sophomore. I never went back on account of, I went to help the folks out.
Mm-hmm. A lot of kids did back then, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I can remember some of the teachers that I had at the high school there. Veronica O'Neill was a teacher at William Penn, or where the Legion was. He was our teacher up there. William who married Curl? I can't remember who married Curl. Murray? A Murray named Mary Curl? Curl was the superintendent at a high school.
Jules Curl. Jules Curl?
Jules.
Jules Curl, yeah.
And he married somebody by the name of Murray. And he was quite a guy, Merle. He was quite a guy, superintendent. Bertie Mae Podkowski was a teacher. Ravnicker was a teacher. Cleta Dutson was a teacher in high school. Clara Walker was a teacher in high school. Silver Ovalinas, Cletus Dutson. I remember all them teachers. I guess there's none left today. they're all in Mookie's pasture, I guess. Or quite, yeah. Lincoln School was nice. They used to have a dentist come up, check everybody's teeth. They have doctors come up, a nurse come up, you know, and it was nice. Yeah. But I don't remember that at the school at William Penn after. I don't remember them doing it. It was something. Quite the days.
Oh. What else happened in town that made the news back then that you might remember?
Well, we always had the Forest City News, you know. So as far as I can remember, Forest City News.
Mm-hmm.
Gilder was in the start of the Forest City News.
Was there,
And then Kameen took it over eventually, and he's been ever since.
was there any, like notable things happened in town that you remember? Like did anybody
Oh,
famous
yeah,
ever come
they
here?
had a lot of fires at that time.
Really? Oh.
Martin Mookies was one of the wheels, one of the richest guys in Forest City. He had a dance hall. He was always Burgess. They called it a Burgess at that time. No mayor, he was a Burgess.
Yeah.
And he would go to, when they have council meetings and something, he was always looking out for his favor, you know. They would call him, he had a council meeting one time, and at the end of the bars, the beer gardens, they had a spittoon. And the guys used to go over there and then spit in there, see? And somebody made a motion to do away with the spittoons or something, you know, and do something else. Let them go outside or something. And Mookie said, let the spoons in there, we can take care. I'll make a son might be one of them. They're making some be a spittoon. Yeah, he had money. Oh, Mookie had money. He put all his kids through college.
Now, you said he had a dance hall. Do you remember where the dance hall was?
Yes. Up there where from across that avenue was across from Zero's. There was a dance hall up through there.
Who played there? Was it live bands? Did they have a live
Oh,
band?
they'd have lances right along.
I mean, a live band played in there?
A live band, yeah. Do you ever remember anybody, like any famous bands coming here? Any orchestras ever come?
Well, you always had the band in Forest City. Carl Francisci was a great band leader, and they had their own player. They would play at the bands. They always had music all the time.
Now, I know there was always a rumor that some people, like famous people, used to stop here. Do you ever remember anybody ever coming through Forest City that was famous?
There was one famous Pat. I can't remember his last name.
Pat O'Malley?
Pat O'Malley.
He's from Forest City.
He was
right?
Forest City.
Yeah, he was.
Pat O'Malley had a place right across from Jones's funeral parlor. He had like an office there. That's where he had his office there. And he got to be quite a guy, I guess, with plays and stuff, shows and stuff like that. He had quite a record.
Right, he was in the movies also.
Movies.
Mm-hmm.
We had the Friedman Theater in Forest City. Matinees on Saturday afternoon, 10 cents. They had movies 3 times a week at nighttime. And on Saturday afternoon, most of the shows were serials. Tom Mix, Hoot Gibson, and all them guys. They show us after each different week. You have to keep going and see how they're coming out. Junior Spiegel. There was a movie on with I remember this is left like it was just here. It was Tom Mix, and Tom Mix with his horse, Tony, I guess it was, trying to find the outlaw, you know. And he kept going along like this, riding along like that. Junior sat down there and he hollered, "Tom, they're upstairs! Tom, they're upstairs!" I'll never. Junior Sweegle, he said in the yawning, "Tom, they're upstairs!" But that was quite a thing. Matinees, that was thing.
How about any, you mentioned outlaws, any criminals? Was there any criminals up here in Forest City?
No, they had their guys in trouble, troubles and so
Yeah.
on like that. A natural small town.
Yeah.
They had a murder in Vanling. You remember that time
The little girl?
that girl in Vanling? They had that
What?
murder that time.
You remember that?
I can remember when it happened. Yeah,
Oh.
I think he's still in prison, as far as I know. He was up for parole, and many a time they wouldn't give him
Yeah.
parole.
I don't know.
It was a bad thing that he did.
Yeah.
No, they had a lot of fires. Had a lot of fires in town. The old Forest House was a hotel. They had a bar and everything. That burned one time during the middle of the night.
How do they put them out? What kind of fire trucks did they have? Or what kind of
Well,
equipment?
there was 3 fire companies in town at that time. Enterprise was one of them. The other 2, I can't remember. But they was always separate. Eventually, they joined up to one. But they still had the fire hydrants and everything. Yeah. That was quite a town in those days.
Now, do you remember when the town had like 6,000 people in it? That it had many
Well,
people?
I remember there was around 8,000 people there at one time, Forest City. And they had all kinds of stores and everything, supermarkets. They had 2 A&Ps. And Sylvania had their own meat markets. There was a gas station up by Francisci's, Richfield gas station. Across from Hornbach's was another gas station. Torp's across from the Fourth South. He had pumps out there where you get gas. And of course they had a gas station in Vanling. But they had the two A&Ps. Raymond Gilder had a shoe store. Solomon's had a
The S&M?
clothing shop,
Yeah.
shoe shop, clothes shop. Brassel had a restaurant. Cooley's had where you bought marbles and different trinkets and stuff like that. And his place burned, Cooley's.
Now, where was that? The one that burned?
Right across Cooley's. Cooley's was right across from. I think his place was right where Fitzsimmons has their insurance office. I think that's where he had his booth. Because I remember when they cleaned up after his place burned down, they took all his stuff and trucked it up there where the restaurant is in Forest City. They had a place up there where they piled all that stuff. Because he sold marbles and stuff like alleys and stuff like that. When you go up there and dig in that stuff looking for the alleys and marbles, I'll never forget that. And trinkets that he had, you could find trinkets in there that he had for sale. You know, that's kind of store he had. And eventually that got to be a restaurant up there. Harry Romick had a restaurant. Harry Romick had one pig leg. Always had the restaurant. Harry always hollered. He says, "When I go out in the wintertime in the snow, one leg would always go down, the pig leg. The pig leg would always go down. He'd be all right with the other leg." I can remember Harry. And then after that, different ones had that restaurant up there. Genesi had it. You remember when Genesi had it? Yeah. Raymond Gilder was a man that his shop was next to Jones's funeral parlor. And Raymond used to go out there and just lean on his meter pay for the meter. And when somebody would go in, look at a pair of shoes or something, he'd go quick in and turn the lights on. Raymond Gilder. They always remember Raymond. Carl Nagelberg had suits, shoes. He was across from the Borough Building. That's where his home was. Carl Nagelberg.
Now, would that have been where Conchars is?
Right across from the, right on the corner there, right on that building there. Jacob Weiss sold curtains and stuff like that. That same building.
The one that's the factory that was.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Of course. Anybody who can give you any more questions?
I can't really think of anything.
Very interesting, though.
Yep.
Very interesting.
Well, we thank you, Tip. We really appreciate you coming down and doing this for us.
Well,
Yes.
Thank you.
Let me say one thing before I go. I used to, when I lived with Grandma Schriegel and Grandma Tedesco, I knew everyone in Cowtown from where, what's her name's bar is, from right up to the end. I knew every one of them people in there. And the last house, where, what's the name bar? What's the name of her bar?
DG's?
DG's. The house, we used to cut up across there to go to school. And up the top of there was a big shaft where they could get air down into the mines.
Right.
And always, when coming from school, we'd always have throw rocks in there. Listen where these jobs. And the house, first house, past DJ's bar, you had that path up through there. The first one, Shaney lived in there. Shaney house. And then O'Neill house was the next one. And then from there on up, right up to the end of Forest City, I knew everybody. Yeah.
We don't do that anymore.
How many?
Yeah, I can still name a lot of them. I could like Gus Turchik, he worked at the mines at Peterson. You remember Gus? He knew everybody.
Yes, he did.
He knew where every shaft went from that to Peterson mine. He would tell us how it went under the river and under the cemeteries. He knew where everyone was.
Wow.
And for a long time, it's at Peterson. On Route 170, there was a place where you could pull up where the mine was. And there was an opening where you could get down in. And people used to go down there in their ways and get a little cold. But eventually, it got to be a hazard, and they filled it in.
Right.
But when it was open like that, you could see the steam coming up out of the mines like that.
Wow. How many people are left from your class who you went to school with? Do you have any classmates left? Are they around?
Do you have any classmates left that you remember that are still alive?
No.
No.
Really? Wow.
No, I don't have, none of them. None of them. I'm the old guy, I guess. I'm the oldest one in Uniondale now.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh.
Laura's been good to me. I can say that. I never had no action in World War II. It wasn't. I was assigned to different places. I traveled a lot, different places and everything, and got quite a history. It's really something. So
Good. Very good.
Thank you
I
again.
had my youngest son was in the Navy. He was went to a boot camp in Florida, and when he was down there, we went down to see him, and they would arrange for trips, you know, and if you say, come on down, we go on a trip. So he was on a, I can't think of what the Shreveport. It was named out of Louisiana, the ship what he was on. And we took a cruise out of Florida right up to Carolina, and we went through that rough part of the ocean there. Remember where it had how many shipwrecks there? I can't remember.
Triangle.
Yeah.
And that was some of the roughest water in there, and I'll never forget. I slept up on deck. I didn't. I couldn't stand down in there. And then one time they had arrangements for the carrier, the aircraft carrier, the U.S. Independence, had a cruise for their, and we got on a cruise. We went from Norfolk up to New York City when they had some kind of centennial. And we were treated, they had air training on the ships where they were taking off and landing.
Wow.
And when we got into New York Harbor, they gave us tickets to the baseball games. They treat us royalty, you know. We were not part of the ship, but they give us part of the ship because they put USS Independence on here. We wasn't members or anything, but we part of the crew. They give us a ride up there or something.
Wow.
We had the Dallas Cowboy cheer girls up there. Charles, Ray Charles was on that ship. He did the singing on that ship. It was quite a thing that was. And then going back to Norfolk, they had maneuvers where we could take off. And when they'd all get them up in the air, the whole squadron would buzz the ship. And we had to lay right down on deck. You could feel the wind go by.
Wow.
Wow.
I thought it was something. That's most of the time I had to see it. And all the time I was in the Navy.
Wow.
Yeah. But that you remember Pearl Harbor? It was a terrible mess out there. They were still repairing ships and everything after that war was over. That's bad.
Well,
Thank you
Tip,
again.
thank you.
Yes.
Okay,
very
I
good.
enjoyed it.
Very good interview.
Brought back a lot of memories.
Did it? Yeah?
Yeah.
I bet it
Good.
did.